In 1933, the U.S. government paid farmers to slaughter over 6 million pigs and plow under 10 million acres of crops, while families across the country were going hungry. They called it supply management. The people who lived through it called it something else entirely. That moment cracked something open in rural America. It revealed just how far the hand of government could reach, into your barn, your field, your smokehouse, and it made a generation of homesteaders quietly start hiding what they knew. The tricks they used to feed their families, preserve food without electricity, grow medicine in the backyard, and stay off the grid entirely. Most of that knowledge didn't make it to the next generation. Not by accident, by design. Before we get into all 22 of them, if this kind of history matters to you, subscribe now. This channel exists to make sure none of it disappears completely. Number 22 is seed saving with varietal isolation. Long before Monsanto filed its first patent, every farm family saved seed with discipline. A farmer in Iowa in 1922 would plant his best corn stalks at least 600 feet from any neighbor's field to prevent cross-pollination. He'd tag the healthiest ears mid-season, let them dry on the stalk past the first frost, then shell and store them in paper bags inside clay crocks. The seed bank wasn't in some Swiss vault, it was in the root cellar. The practice collapsed after the Plant Patent Act of 1930, and the rise of hybrid seed companies like Pioneer Hybrid, who engineered seeds that wouldn't reproduce true to type, forcing annual repurchase. You can still save open-pollinated seeds legally, you just weren't taught how. Number 21 is lard rendering and fat preservation. Your great-grandmother didn't throw anything away after slaughter day. Every scrap of fat got rendered down in a cast iron pot over low heat. One hog could yield up to 40 pounds of clean white lard that, stored in a sealed crock in a cool cellar, lasted over a year without refrigeration. It was the cooking fat, the pastry fat, the lip balm, the boot waterproofing, and the rust prevention. The U.S. Dietary Guidelines of 1980 officially condemned saturated animal fat, and Crisco, a Procter & Gamble product introduced in 1911, had spent decades lobbying to replace lard in the American kitchen. Lard didn't disappear because it was unhealthy. It disappeared because it couldn't be patented. Number 20 is root cellaring with layered sand storage. Before electric refrigeration became standard in the 1940s, root vegetables were stored underground between layers of slightly damp sand or sawdust. Carrots, parsnips, turnips, and beets packed this way stayed edible from October through March. The key was temperature, ideally between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which a properly built cellar 2 feet below the frost line would naturally maintain. This skill didn't die because refrigerators were better. It died because refrigerators were sold. Number 19 is medicinal herb distillation. In rural Appalachia and across the Ozarks, families ran small copper pot stills, not for whiskey but for medicine. Peppermint oil, elderflower water, and yarrow tinctures were distilled at home and used as antiseptics and fever reducers. The knowledge came from a combination of indigenous practice and European folk medicine in continuous use for over 200 years. The Durham-Humphrey Amendment of 1951 gradually made it illegal to claim any homemade preparation had medicinal value. The practice didn't vanish, it just went quiet. Number 18 is gravity-fed water systems. Before pressure tanks and municipal water, hill farmers ran their own supply using nothing but elevation. A sealed stone enclosure around a hillside spring captured clean water, and wooden pipe carried it downhill to the farmhouse by gravity alone. Some of these systems, built in the 1880s, were still functioning in the 1960s. Municipal water requirements and modern plumbing codes now make off-grid water systems nearly impossible to permit legally. Someone decided you should pay for your water. Every month. Forever. Here's what you need to sit with for a moment. The 1930s weren't just hard times, they were a proving ground. The families that made it through survived because they had layered, redundant skills that no regulation had yet reached. The systematic dismantling of those skills didn't happen through force. It happened through convenience, subsidy, and zoning law. You were given a grocery store and told you didn't need anything else. That was the deal. Most people took it. Number 17 is ash lye soap making. Wood ash from hardwoods, oak, hickory, or maple was leached with rainwater in a wooden barrel to produce lye, then boiled with rendered fat to make hard bar soap. The ratio your great-grandmother knew by heart. Roughly 2.5 pounds of fat for every pint of strong lye. A batch made in October would supply the household all year. Ivory soap, a Procter & Gamble product since 1879, spent decades making this process seem dangerous and primitive. Nobody banned it, they just made you feel like you couldn't do it. Number 16 is smoke curing meat without nitrates. Traditional smokehouse curing used salt, thyme, and cold hardwood smoke over 2 to 6 weeks. A whole ham cured this way and hung in a cool space was shelf-stable for up to a year. The USDA began regulating commercial curing in the 1920s and effectively pushed sodium nitrate into every processed meat on the shelf. Home curing is still legal in most states. The knowledge of how to do it without commercial curing salts has nearly vanished. Number 15 is clay plaster and limewash walls. Pre-drywall homes used a three-coat system: clay and straw, a finer clay layer, then a finished coat of limewash made from slaked lime. Limewash is naturally antimicrobial. Its high pH kills mold and bacteria on contact. Gypsum drywall, pushed hard after World War II as fast and cheap, replaced this system entirely. Building codes now require materials that require purchasing. There's no permit category for skills your family practiced for 300 years. Number 14 is natural pest control through companion planting. Long before DDT entered American agriculture in 1945, farmers controlled pests through plant relationships. Nasturtiums drew aphids away from vegetables. Tansy and wormwood along fence lines repelled flies. Interplanting onions with carrots confused the carrot fly. None of it required buying anything. The pesticide industry, built on repurposed chemical warfare research after World War II, had obvious financial interest in replacing these methods. Today they're called companion planting and sold to you as a trend. Number 13 is rainwater collection and cistern management. Families across the Great Plains built underground cisterns filtered through gravel, charcoal, and sand that could supply a family of 5 through a dry summer. In 2012, Colorado finally legalized residential rainwater collection, but only up to 110 gallons, and only for outdoor use. For decades, collecting rain that fell on your own roof was technically illegal in multiple states. Read that sentence again. Number 12 is wild fermentation for preservation. Before commercial yeast packets, homesteaders relied on wild fermentation for everything from sourdough to sauerkraut to apple cider vinegar. A crock of shredded cabbage packed with salt and left at room temperature for 2 weeks produced lacto-fermented vegetables that lasted through winter without heat processing. It required no equipment beyond a crock, a weight, and patience. Home production remains legal. Most people simply no longer know how. Number 11 is tallow candle dipping. Beef tallow burns cleaner than most people expect. Candle dipping was a fall ritual. Wicks of braided cotton string dipped repeatedly into hot tallow until the right diameter was reached. A productive afternoon yielded enough candles for an entire winter. Paraffin, a petroleum byproduct, replaced tallow candles after Standard Oil began marketing it in the 1850s. Tallow candles never became illegal. Your great-grandmother just stopped teaching the skill because the store sold paraffin for almost nothing. Number 10 is poke salad preparation. Pokeweed grew wild across the American South and was a documented food source from the colonial period through the 1940s. Young spring leaves boiled through 3 separate changes of water neutralized the plant's natural toxins before frying in bacon grease. Skip a boil and you'd know about it. That precise, safety-critical handling knowledge collapsed when foraging culture disappeared after World War II. Number 9 is clay pot cold storage. Nested clay pots separated by wet sand cooled interiors by 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit through evaporation alone. Carrots stayed crisp for weeks, documented in American agricultural literature as early as 1860. The Rural Electrification Act of 1936 brought power lines to the countryside, and within a decade the clay pot method was forgotten, not outlawed, just rendered invisible by access to a plug. Number 8 is natural cordage from stinging nettle. Nettle stalks harvested in late summer were dried, split, and hand-rolled into strong fiber used for lashing, fencing, and rope making across the rural Midwest and Appalachia throughout the 1800s. Commercial hemp rope and later nylon displaced it, not because nettle cordage was inferior, but because it took time that wage labor no longer allowed. Number 7 is charcoal water filtration. Layers of hardwood charcoal, coarse sand, and fine gravel stacked in a wooden barrel or ceramic crock produced measurably cleaner water, documented in American well-digging manuals from the 1850s. Municipal water treatment infrastructure expanded aggressively through the 1920s and 30s made this skill redundant. It remains one of the most functional emergency water skills almost nobody under 60 knows how to build. Number 6 is hand threshing and winnowing grain. A family with a quarter acre of wheat could harvest, thresh, and winnow enough grain for a winter using a wooden flail in the wind. Threshing meant beating cut stalks against a wooden frame. Winnowing meant tossing grain in a wide basket so the breeze carried away the chaff. By 1920, most of this knowledge had already begun to fade. Knowing how grain becomes flour without a machine sounds useless right up until it isn't. Number 5 is vinegar mother cultivation. Every farmhouse before 1930 kept a live vinegar mother in a ceramic crock, a culture of acetobacter bacteria that converted raw apple cider into sharp live apple cider vinegar, useful for food preservation, wound cleaning, and fermentation. Commercial pasteurized vinegar, stripped of the live culture, became the grocery standard after Heinz began mass-producing it in the 1880s. A live vinegar mother, properly maintained, is effectively immortal. Your great-grandmother's crock could still be producing vinegar today if someone had known to keep it going. Number 4 is kitchen garden salve making. Calendula petals infused in lard over low heat, then strained and cooled, produced a wound salve that U.S. military field reports from the Civil War documented as effective. Plantain leaf for insect stings, comfrey root for bruising. These preparations appeared in American home remedy books through the 1920s. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 turned your grandmother's salve shelf into a regulatory gray area overnight. Number 3 is reading land for water. Before drilling rigs, experienced well diggers watched where morning dew pooled longest, where moisture-loving plants like cattail or elderberry grew without irrigation, where the ground stayed soft through a dry July. This observational skill was passed through apprenticeship on working farms from the 1600s through the early 20th century. When affordable drilling rigs arrived after World War II, nobody bothered learning to read the land anymore. We traded observation for horsepower. We do that a lot. Number 2 is treadle sewing and hand-loom weaving of household linens. Skills so common in 1880 that most rural women couldn't have imagined buying a sheet. Today, most people couldn't imagine making one. That distance between making and buying is the whole story of this list compressed into a single sentence. And number 1 is the kitchen apothecary. Every homestead before 1930 had a medicine shelf built entirely from what grew in the kitchen garden. Echinacea for immunity, valerian for sleep, calendula salve for wounds, St. John's wort for low spirits. These weren't folk superstitions, they were documented in the U.S. Pharmakeia from 1820 all the way through 1916, when pharmaceutical lobbying pushed most botanical remedies out of official medical recognition for the last time. Every single thing on this list was once ordinary, practiced by people with no special training, no certification, and no subscription. They did it because knowing how to take care of yourself was considered basic human dignity, not a hobby, not a lifestyle brand, not a trend. Pick one skill from this list and try it this week. Not because the grid is going down, but because knowing how to do something yourself changes who you are. It changes what you're willing to accept. Tell me in the comments which one are you starting with.